Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have a very special guest today. It's Dr. Hillary Blackburn, and she's a pharmacy leader and advocate. She's also in the innovative and the business development field of pharmacy. So I'm super excited. Welcome to the show, Hillary.
Thank you, Marina. Excited to be here.
Yes. So I am so curious, what got you into pharmacy in the first place? What was your background in, and why did you decide to study this field?
Yeah, so I always had an interest in medicine. And, from an early age, I picked, Clara Barton, the nurse from the Civil War, to like do an art project on in third grade. And it was just always something that kind of captivated me. And my path that I thought was going to be going into medical school. But at one of the Ole Miss or University of Mississippi Scholars Day events, I bump into one of the associate professors for the dean of students. And he's talking to me about the early entry program. And I was kind of encouraged by my parents to try that route. And, I'm so glad that I ended up doing that because as I'm sure many of our, current pharmacists or student pharmacists have come to find out is that, once you get into that fourth year, the opportunities are endless. Picking a really wide variety of rotation experiences was something that I was really intentional about doing. And, even having the experience of going and getting to intern on Capitol Hill for one of the US senators, I think also helped kind of instill my passion for policy and advocacy. And of course, I come back and I ask that same dean of students, Dr. Marvin Wilson. I said, I love DC, but how do I go back for pharmacy? And we all know pharmacy is a small world. And there was an alum that was the director for the Office of Pharmacy Affairs. At that time, I had no idea what that was. And I said, great, I'll do it. And so the very next summer, I had the chance to go back and live in DC on the Hill, took the metro out to Rockville, Maryland at the HRSA office building and learned all about the 340B program and all of the different initiatives that they were doing from that programmatic standpoint. And so now my journey has come full circle from having that clinical experience and doing a residency in the hospital and ambulatory setting and working in a variety of different pharmacy settings, which has really given me a lot of variety in all of the different fields of pharmacy. And then pulling that together with that policy and kind of programmatic experience. So I've been the chief pharmacy officer at Dispensary of Hope, a national charitable medication distributor for almost the last 8 years. And that role has grown and evolved over the years. And it's been so fun to see that grow as my full-time job. I'm happy to share some of the other things that keep me busy, but I'll go ahead and stop there.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing it sounds like a very diverse and robust experience in the pharmacy field and pushing our profession forward. What do you think is continuing to motivate and inspire you to advocate and to experience these different settings? And what has been the most rewarding part of your career so far?
Oh gosh. You know, um, I I think that everything kind of comes in seasons too, right? So, not to say that I've always been an overachiever, and even growing up, and that's identified in one of my strengths from Strength Finders, and a maximizer and learner, etc. But when I first moved to Nashville after residency, I took a little step back and just enjoyed getting to know the new city And then I leaned back in. So I think that there's chances that you can, take a break or lean in and lean out. But even as a student, I was, signing up for ASB, Associated Student Body, had the chance to go to APHA Summer Leadership Institute. And so now I just finished being selected as one of APHA's APPM executive committee members, and that is a nationally elected position and a 2-year term. And so that was really fun to be able to meet with other colleagues across the country and hear from more of the APHA staff and some of the direct opportunities and things that were happening at the national organization level. And even at the state level, I love being involved with TPA and serving on the membership engagement committee and legislative and policy committee. It's such an honor to be recognized by peers in that way, to be elected or to be invited for, when I first graduated, of course, I'm sure many others kind of have this feeling too, is that, you're still trying to figure everything out. And so it wasn't, and you see these people with big titles and all these accolades and things, but it's kind of like that vision of like the iceberg. And it's like what you see is the success. You don't see all of the things in the background. And so, it wasn't the first year, the first 2 years, you have to really build and, you got to put in the work. You're not an overnight success. And so, being recognized by, I've been able to serve, on the Dean's Advisory Council for, one of the local colleges here in Nashville, Belmont University, for a few years, and then was just recently invited by my alma mater to serve on the Dean's Advisory Council for the University of Mississippi. And so, being recognized by other leaders to be able to give back and serve in that way is really such an honor. And, I'm so thrilled to be able to do that. But I think, two of the biggest leaps of faith that I've done individually in my career have been launching a podcast when it was still very new. So actually, there were two other ones, like there was only really one that existed in 2017. And then 3 of us kind of came in that summer. So I was an early adopter on podcasting and launched the Talk to Your Pharmacist podcast in August of 2017. So I have had the pleasure to meet and interview and share over 240 pharmacy and other healthcare leaders' stories. And that is really what inspires me. And I remember talking with someone when I was coming up with this idea, and he said, "Oh, you're going to run out of content." I have not run out of content. There continues to be amazing things happening in pharmacy. I love getting on LinkedIn and seeing what people are doing. Seeing some of these innovative solutions providing, I love being on the cutting edge of innovation and technology, seeing how we can bring formulary information right to the provider office so that they know on site, like what's covered, what's not covered, what the prices should be. Got to do an interview with one of those companies, companies like, DocStation and Scripted that are helping to roll out clinical services and make those billable and more readily adopted by going to payers on the behalf of independent pharmacies and hopefully other community pharmacies. So it's just really fun to see some of the innovative technology and thing. And then, of course, individual practitioners. I highlighted a few women in pharmacy that had really inspired me. And that was another thing that I kind of had on my to-do list as I was pregnant with our first baby, was writing a book and help, after going back to school and doing an MBA in 2019. And, that was even after a couple of years of really some professional development growth, reading tons of books. I love leadership books. I geek out on those and Audible. But there was so much growth in that. I mean, I remember talk about seasons. So one of my residency directors gave us all the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People as a resident. And I was like, oh, how great. Immediately put it to the side because, oh, how do I possibly have time for that? And then fast forward a few years, pick it back up, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that was really kind of the start of me going down the rabbit hole of like really doing that. So I try to pull some of those pearls that I'd learned over the years of some of the leadership books, the MBA, and then just highlighting women. So, I mentioned 𝐤𝐤 Barton earlier. When you think about women in pharmacy, there's certainly some great innovators. You can hop online and LinkedIn or social media, and now, we kind of keep popping up. But, I wanted to kind of document that because if you don't see it or you don't know like what the different roles and things are, then sometimes, we really need to encourage that women in pharmacy pipeline. Well, we've got a lot of women in pharmacy, women in leadership pipeline. The only 3% of women are CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. And, there are a lot of different reasons for that. And I go into that in the book. But I also go into some of the things that companies can do. And then some of the things that, we should be doing as women to, raise our hand and sign up for those roles and things. And so, it's been fun to join, one of APHA Foundations. They had an inaugural Women in Pharmacy committee that was kicked off, I think, August of 21. And so, there's definitely, with so many women going into pharmacy, it's great to have that leadership representation and really to help cultivate and, lift other female leaders up. So those are some of the things that keep me passionate and motivated. So
I love it. And I love that you're speaking to this holistic idea of there being seasons in life and in nature. We could see there's cycles, day and night, winter and summer, and time to slow down or time to focus on work or family. And it sounds like you've cultivated that balance and enjoyed that sort of rewarding lifestyle for yourself. So I'd like to know, did you receive any guidance along the way as far as like how to get into these spaces? Why should somebody go for their MBA? How to get involved at a high level in leadership and or in organizations such as APHA? Can you give us some tips on how you learned to do that for yourself?
yeah. So, a lot of it is trial and error. I've certainly had some great mentors along the way. And I'll tell you, some of my favorite mentors too have been executive pharmacy men that are retired because they have a little bit more time. And I've developed some really great relationships with them. But yes, there's been some really great women, and some of these have happened one of my favorites was, one of my preceptors, in school, Dr. Debbie Miner and, Dr. Sharon Dickey. They were amazing. Leanne Ross, great leader. She's done a lot of amazing things. So, they're just different people along the way who've been great and instrumental. But for going back and getting my MBA, that was something that, I was exploring, well, what's next? I'm always kind of thinking, what's next? The achiever in me. And I was kind of ready for a new challenge. There, a lot of times companies will have great programs and things for their employees to go back and do other education. And I was able to do my MBA, which of course was not my primary degree, in a self-paced, competency-based course that was online and at a very reasonable rate, through scholarships and different kind of things with my company, which was great. So adding on that like finance and accounting that I didn't get in pharmacy school that, was really helpful to add. And then, asking, I, had the chance to interview a couple of the APHA former presidents and asking them, how, this sometimes, big organizations can sound very complex and hard to break into. And, signing up for committees is the way to do it. It's like, you've just got to put your feet in and volunteer and show up and keep showing up. And then people start to see your name and say, oh yeah, we should ask Hillary about that. So consistency is key.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those tips. And for the students of pharmacy currently, or even just for people in practice that are looking for a way to practice at the top of their license or to diversify their experience, what would your advice be to them as far as what to do in this ever-changing world, right? Like now we are having technology surges and AI, artificial intelligence, and like the role of pharmacy, as you were saying, is being constantly reevaluated and innovated, and people are doing so many interesting things. So are degrees becoming obsolete? Should we still get an MBA or other degrees that you would recommend getting? Any kind of insight on that piece?
Yeah. Well, part of our pharmacist oath is the commitment to lifelong learning, right? And I think that that's really the key. I mean, not just checking the box with CE, but, what are you really interested in? Look at kind of where the trends are and things. And so I think one of the biggest things that I like to tell my students is, sign up for the newsletters and things that are outside of pharmacy. So, I love getting some information from like Becker's Healthcare, Morning Consult, or just, whatever other resources are. So you can start seeing, okay, where are the shifts happening? You can get the update from APHA or ASHP or NCPA, whatever, pharmacy association or your school, but knowing what some of those broader trends are, like, social determinants of health. Of course, we've adopted that now into pharmacy, but in value-based care. But you want to see like what is happening in the other disciplines. So what's medicine doing, or what's this doing, or these large health systems? And so I think that that's really important. I don't think that degrees are going to be obsolete. I think we'll still have to have those, but there are so many opportunities. Another thing that I love to tell students is really, informatics was not even a track when I was going through school. I don't know when that actually was more formally adopted, but I think, data is set, king. You don't have to be a data analyst or data scientist or, actually doing all of the data, but you better know how to ask the right questions. I think that critical thinking is so important. So many times in like our didactic learning, it's like you're in a classroom and you're just consuming, and it's like, okay, how are you critically thinking about how this is happening and to ask the right questions? And so, being embracing technology and embracing change and being open to opportunities is really important. So, if there are some innovators and things to watch that maybe you like, herbal medicine, or maybe you like, functional medicine or genomics or whatever it might be, start following some of those people, do that informational interviewing. People usually like to be asked, for their expertise, and are usually willing to help. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask from some of those people.
Yeah, thank you for those tips as well. And I'm curious because I do see that MBA is something that a lot of pharmacists end up getting. So, is there a specific reason that you would advise somebody to go get it, or is there something that it specifically helped you do in your career?
Yeah, I think that, as healthcare professionals, we don't get enough business training. And so I think that having that is certainly advantageous. I had some real life experience and work experience before I went back and did it. I know that some schools do the dual degree. But yeah, I think that it helps you to think more strategically. I think that, it's also so important whenever you're trying to define your value, or, the ROI that you're bringing to, your department, your organization, more broadly. And so being able to think in those terms is really important. Pharmacy, we keep saying we can't get paid for our services, or why. And, I think that if we embraced more of that, kind of understood how things work, or then, we could make some even more significant changes.
Beautiful. And because you have this bird's eye view of the landscape and all the different settings that you were, participating in, and have a diverse background and skill set, I would like to ask, how do you stay sort of motivated and not get bogged down with some of the landscape that's not so great, right? Like with the conditions, the working conditions, and all the burnout that we're seeing in our profession. How do we stay ahead of the curve and ensure that we are advocating and leading in our space?
Gosh, yeah, that's a great question, because, we have so many colleagues that are on the front lines. And, I did that for the first 10 years that I graduated. I still did moonlighting at one of the, retail chains. And that was great to be able to keep my feet wet and say what's happening in like the most common areas of pharmacy. And I probably have a little bit more of like just that positive outlook, or kind of that we can do it kind of change mentality. And so instead of, thinking about all the things that are going wrong, I like to kind of think about, all right, well, what's going right? And that's kind of, part of the podcast that I have, Talk to Your Pharmacist. It's dispensing stories of success from across the continuum of care. So, even though we see headlines and things that there's shortages of pharmacist workers, and a lot of the answers that we're giving back is, it's not a shortage of workers, it's people are unwilling to work in those conditions and things. And so I think that, there are a lot of people that are kind of raising the flag and, speaking up and, advocating in that well-being and, workplace environment space, which is great. And, I like to just kind of highlight some of the, opportunities and things that are out there. The dispensing model has been struggling. We see pharmacy deserts happening. We see, fewer, or declining reimbursements. And it's really challenging environment right now. But there's, how do we diversify our services and look at other revenue streams and things? If you are miserable in your job, what are some of the things, like, are you going home and vegging out and watching TV all night? Or, can you take an hour and, work on developing some skills, or like go to some networking events and try to meet some other pharmacists? And are you kind of going and like dragging your feet and saying woe is me? Or are you kind of out there and saying like, hi, I'm Hillary, great to meet you? And so I think, networking is going to be really important because if you are looking for other opportunities, it's great to have a really big network. And then continuing to like stack your skills. I was working my full-time job and going back and doing my MBA. Now that was pre having kids. So thankfully, that was the right season for that. But then once I had my baby in 2020, 2021 was another year of, just figuring out, I kind of had my podcast on autopilot, and my job, I had that kind of dialed in. And so that was a season of adjusting to being a new parent. And, I just finished up this term with the APHA executive committee, which, was a lot of volunteer hours and things, but we're about to have another baby. And so it's kind of good timing to like, take some things off and then, say no to some things and say yes to others. And so that's an important thing too, is like, you cannot do everything all the time. And your career is going to be, 30, 40 years. I don't know, maybe some of these like fire people, the financially independent, retire early, might have shorter career spans, but anyway, you've got a whole long time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So don't feel like you have to be the president of this and, sign up for everything and accomplish all your goals before you're 30 or 40. So, yes, those are just a few things.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the seasons again and allowing yourself to just prioritize differently in different phases and stages of your life and your career and stack things accordingly. And I have a podcast, obviously, as well. We're on my podcast, and I interview so many other pharmacists that have switched something in their career or added on something that makes them more excited or makes them more aligned with their inner value system, which makes them feel like, they're self-actualizing and fulfilling their purpose in a new way, which is energizing in itself. And specifically, a lot of people that are integrating more holistic modalities because that's their calling and their interest. But there's so many other things that you can do. And I think it starts with awareness first. Like, you have to be in tune and allow your body and your emotional body to communicate those things to you. And that information that you're not satisfied, right, or you're burnt out is important. And you can choose to do something about it. You can choose to change something. And change is always hard. Change is, something unexpected, something that's a risk, right? Because we're just used to being at a certain level of dissatisfaction and we are used to dealing with it. but to do something new requires a little bit of a risk, and you don't know if it's going to be better or worse. So a lot of people just choose to, all right, I'll just stay with this because I know how to deal with it. But it's that realization, I think, about the choice that you don't have to stay and you don't have to change. You are at choice. So I think just reframing that as a simple mindset shift to I'm choosing to stay or I'm choosing to go, is really empowering, and taking that responsibility that, yes, you can't control your circumstances, but you do have a lot more control than you tell yourself by saying, I have to. And so I would invite anybody listening to start saying to yourself, I choose to, and see how that affects your life. And I would love to ask too, Hillary, looking back on your career trajectory, is there any lingering regret or something you would have done differently?
Oh gosh. Yeah. And I love that you pointed out that it is up to us. We do get to choose. We don't get to choose how people, treat us or our circumstances all the time, but we do get to choose how we respond. And, using that gratitude, exercises and different things. So really great point. Looking back at anything that I regret or would have done differently, um, I don't know. That's a good question because I feel like I am always kind of looking ahead and don't really like to there's definitely been times, and I think probably being a mom and just being so busy and having like so many different things, I just don't have time to dwell and think about all the negative things. Sometimes, I'll still have like, gosh, I wish that I had had, that conversation with my coworker or that conversation with my spouse, or that conversation would have gone differently. Or, you think about like, oh, you had like the perfect thing to say like later. But, I really feel like, you know, I'm as a planner, I always like to kind of have Hillary's plan. And it's always been so much better when God has, I've kind of leaned into what his plan has been for my life. For example, my husband and I were married 5 years before we had our first, or before we started trying to have children. And it was amazing. We traveled. I mean, we've been to Thailand and Greece and Cuba and the Italian Alps and all kinds of amazing places. And we always hacked the system and used credit card points and not to say that sounds very glamorous, but we definitely figure out, or actually we had an Airbnb revenue. We would rent out our house, which I had a love-hate relationship with that. But we would do Airbnb with our house in Nashville, and that would fund a lot of our travel. Travel is very important to us and is something that we really enjoy, but my husband just wasn't ready. And as women, we're often worried about like our biological clocks and things like that. And I would say get frustrated or impatient, or things like that. And there is was so much joy in having a baby in 2020. My work had gone remote, and it was a wonderful time to start having kids. So that's been really great. And then looking back, I do tell students the story. So when I moved to Nashville, I was working for a family friend at an independent pharmacy, and he ended up selling the business. And so I was kind of looking for another job, and the job search is always so hard, especially when you're like a new grad, or, still young in your career and, what's your experience? Like 1 year, none, this, or you just don't know people and you're like, I don't know what I like or don't like. Well, I went on some interviews with a company and, I was asking about the culture and one of the responses was, walk on eggshells. And I was like, oh, I can come in and make a difference. No, Mayday, run the other way. If anybody says anything like that and it sounds kind of a negative or something, then that should be a red flag. Like, I can't believe, that was actually shared in the interview, but I did end up um going and working at that company. And they were, of course, little did I know, as like an, new employee and so green, didn't know that they were just hiring up people just to get through an acquisition. And so, I learned a lot from that. I'm glad that, I learned about prior authorizations and who does that, pharmacists, and, what Medicare kind of exceptions and things, and, kind of how a health plan works. But it, there wasn't great leadership. There wasn't a great team environment. I definitely learned some things that I don't enjoy doing, which is the monotonous. To me, I like to do something that's different every day and where I can kind of use my creative and, relationship and networking skills. So anyway, sometimes you take opportunities, on the flip side, you don't want to just be holding out forever on that perfect job when, you're young or new, or sometimes you just got to get in and get experience or like start getting a paycheck. And then you can start, building on those extra skills as mentioned. But, if you, hear some of those things, then just like keep your head down. And so anyway, I like to kind of share that is, you're not always going to have your favorite or dream job. And I think that also makes me really appreciate, some of the things that I love about working at a smaller nonprofit, or, some of the things that I've done, just independently. I mentioned being a mom, and we're expecting our second next month. So very, very soon. And so, my being a patient kind of helped get me thinking about some of the gaps in care. And, that's what kind of started my wheels going on creating a maternal health solution, which, the rates for maternal health in maternal mortality in the US are the worst of any developed country, which is just horrible. And, being a new mom, or, there's that fourth trimester and there's all these questions that you have. And, there's just not really a great, set of resources. I remember I had a C-section, and, I'd never been to a PT before. And, Spain and France, I think, offer PT services for all post pregnancy women. And, that's not really it's not really common knowledge, or, to do that, or just some of the other things like the UK sends, a nurse to your home. And so, instead of in the US where we go back and we have our our visit at the 6-week mark, and you're like, everything going okay? Great. Do you need any form of contraception? Or, there could be a lot more services and things and just resources to better support moms and new parents. And so that's some of what I'm trying to build at RX for Mom. So
Yeah, I mean, you hit on so many good points there. So first of all, congratulations on the second baby to come. Second of all, I love the perspective of, yes, hindsight is always 2020, but looking for those silver linings and looking at your experiences as a teaching or learning moment. And I love the quote, you either win or you learn, right? So everything could be just seen as something that you had to go through in order to learn something, or just another way that you can reframe, and you get to choose to either beat yourself up for something and, judge yourself or the situation really harshly, or judge others. Or you can reframe that and say, hey, you know what, now I know, and now this is helping me to prevent a bigger mistake, or, something in the future. So I love that perspective. And, you could take it going backwards with regrets. You could also take it just going forward. And instead of feeling overwhelmed, with all these things and having like a 5, 10, 15-year perfect plan, just what you talked about before a little bit, sometimes requiring surrender, right? And trusting that you know enough to take one step, and then each step can inform what's the next best step. And just taking baby steps is the way to go sometimes. And it's nice to have a plan, but also nice to have some empathy, actually a lot of empathy and compassion for, life happening and you having to adjust and be flexible with your plans. And that's actually in nature. You could also see, like, when you're flexible, you're actually showing a lot of strength. And, something could be very hard, but then can break. So I love that. And I totally agree about maternal health too, needing so much more support. And even the way we see pregnancy, and we even call it, somebody is a patient, like a pregnant patient, as if it's a pathology, but it's actually a very natural process. And I think in our country, we lack a lot. Like if we look at some reports from the Commonwealth Fund, as far as how we compare to other high income countries, as our healthcare expenditures are rising, but the quality of care and health outcomes are ranked really poorly in comparison. So we've got to start changing how we approach our resources that we're spending, and really focusing, in my opinion, on preventative education, public health. And that's where I see, why I'm so passionate about herbalism, because it's so sustainable and it's regenerative. And for example, I chose to go to a birthing center, and I chose to have drug-free. And again, this is not a judgment, but I think a lot of people just don't realize, they're not educated at what's possible and how you can prepare for both pregnancy and postpartum, how postpartum is very important. And the gap is definitely there for support in postpartum, which could prevent a lot of, postpartum depression and so many things, if we're just aware of what to plan for and what to expect.
Yes. If anything, that was another learning of things that go out of your control. Going into the hospital, and my daughter's heart rate kept decelerating, and it was 3 strikes and she's out. And so thankfully I was there, and, we had great doctor's care, but yes, things are going to be out of your control, but I thankfully was very peaceful and calm about the situation, and, everything turned out wonderfully. So, yes.
Yeah, beautiful. So Hillary, what's next for you? Like, what do you love about what you currently have going on, and what are your next plans in your career?
Oh gosh, yes. And I love that you brought up about, thinking about what's in your 15-year, 20-year vision. And I did a mentorship with ACHE. So that's the American College of Healthcare Executives. And so again, importance of getting into associations and groups that are independent of just pharmacy. And the very first exercise that the mentor had me do was map out my life for 20 years. And I'm going, oh my gosh, how do I know what's going to happen? And, we had one, but okay, maybe hopefully we have another baby. Well, what does that look like for your career? Are you going to, and that is a challenge, for working moms, is, in order to push, some people just go through, and sometimes it's good to take a step back and enjoy, so It is always interesting. I'm definitely going to enjoy my 4-month maternity leave that's available in Tennessee and soak that in. But yeah, I'm also, really passionate about working on some of these things for RX for Mom. So, reliving that mom experience as, going through pregnancy and breastfeeding and, administering medications and thinking about things for, now we'll have a boy. We've had a girl, so that'll be a whole new learning curve. But trying to put together some resources and a business model to kind of help do that is something that I plan to keep working on, and still staying engaged in the associations. I've peeled off some of my responsibilities, but yeah, and our travel on our personal life is not quite, I don't think I've gone anywhere. Well, I take that back. We went somewhere internationally in March. It was the perfect timing because my daughter was old enough to stay with grandparents for about a week. And we had kind of this once in a lifetime opportunity to go to Israel. And it was with a group, and they said, just get there. We'll take care of everything else. And so you can't turn that down. So, that was our first international, and probably will be the last one we do for a year or two. But we love to stay involved in our community, do things with friends, and so yes, just enjoying life with toddlers and raising babies too.
Yeah, I love that. I have a boy and a girl too, so it's really precious. And I want to thank you, Hillary, for sharing and allowing us to get a pulse on your perspectives of pharmacy and how to push it forward and the advocacy that you're doing. So thank you so much for your time. And if you have just a couple more minutes, I'd love to do a rapid fire round with you.
Okay. All right.
All right. So number one, what's your number one tip for somebody to improve their quality of life right now?
Their quality of life right now. I have to use a calendar. My husband started sending me calendar invites when we went on some of our first dates. And if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist. So if people are not using a calendar, Google Calendar, everything is electronic. I do not use a paper one. I have not done that for years. And it just helps me to stay organized and to plan. And so I think that, if you're having trouble with exercising or anything, or, I don't have time for this, put it on the calendar, and, that should be a goal. So using a calendar.
I love that. Yeah, I'm doing the same thing myself. And it's like you actually have to schedule breaks too, because if you don't, or time with yourself, like you said, or exercise time, it has to be there, because then you don't prioritize it as much as you would an appointment or a podcast interview, for example. So treat your dates with yourself just as equally important as other appointments you have on there, would be my little tidbit as well. Okay, number two. So speaking of how we can stay accountable and prioritize our time, what would be your advice for somebody that wants to step out of the box, wants to do something new, but there's a lot of fear and overwhelm in the way?
When I hit send on those first 3 podcast episodes that the whole world could potentially hear, I'm like, is anybody going to listen to this? What? And, now I've been doing it for 6 years and love getting feedback. So, don't be afraid to put yourself out there or to fail. At least you've tried and given it your effort. So I think that I was reading something on parenting about the unmotivated child or something. And it's like, often it's not they're unmotivated or lazy. They have this fear, or it's like perfectionism. And, pharmacists were kind of type A. So Even if it's not perfect, I love the quote of like, just get version 1.0 out there. So, just start, putting yourself out there. And your first few times, like my first podcast episodes were not great. So, you'll get better as you practice.
I love that perspective too. And something fun to close us out with. What's your guilty pleasure?
Oh, guilty pleasure. Well, I do love dark chocolate. So that's probably something that I do enjoy doing. But it's also sometimes nice to just, I don't go, I work hard, and then sometimes it's hard to like read books at this phase right now. So I may have a show or something that I'll watch, and that's like kind of a down chill time. I don't immediately we don't have the TV running at our house at all times. Growing up, my parents always had like a news channel or something on, and we never have the TV on, but my husband and I will sometimes like catch one show. So that's kind of a little bit of a relaxation, guilty pleasure too.
Yeah, Netflix and chill, right?
Sometimes you need that.
Love it. All right. Well, Dr. Hillary, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for sharing those pearls of wisdom with us. And how can people learn more about your work and support you?
Yeah. So definitely check out my podcast, Talk to Your Pharmacist. I'm on Instagram at Talk to Your Pharmacist. And then any of the new stuff I'm doing, www.rx, the number 4, mom.com, and then RX_4_mom on Instagram, and reach out on LinkedIn. I love to have LinkedIn connections, and that's a great way to get a hold of me as well. So.
All right, beautiful. Well, I'll have all that in the show notes, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day and a pleasant weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Marina. Great to be here.